Hello, I'm Craig Thielen, and this is the 1% Better podcast. Today I'm speaking with Gerd Leonhard, futurist, humanist, and CEO of the Futures Agency, and he is based out of beautiful Switzerland, but he's in a secret remote location today that we won't talk about, but it's beautiful. Welcome to the show and 1% Better, Gerd.
Thanks for having me.
So, Gerd, first of all, I'm many times told that I have a very unique title. My title is Chief Essentialist. I work for a management consulting company called Trissential. But I think you've got a title that's even more interesting and unique, and that is one of a futurist and humanist. So first of all, tell us what that is and what that means.
Yeah, I'm probably a bit unusual as far as futurist goes. My work is really about observing the future. It's not so much about prediction, which is very hard to do. It has been achieved sometimes, but my work is about essentially just intuition and imagination. And so what I do for my clients and for myself and for people, organizations, governments, is to zoom into the future 5 to 7, maybe 10 years, and then kind of collect what I find there, right? And then come back to today and say, okay, it's going to be like this. Like AI is a new technology platform. And what does that mean in 7 or 10 years? And how do you change to take advantage of it? And how do you prepare? So I always say the future is not about prediction, it's about being better prepared. And that's kind of my mantra. And I follow the work of Alvin Toffler, Arthur C. Clarke, and Buckminster Fuller, people like that.
Yeah, well, it's so more or less it's your focus. And as you said, so you're focused thinking ahead, where are we going? Where are things headed so that we can act better today, better informed? So I love that because frankly, I think very few people spend time doing that. We're so focused, on, quarterly results and what do we have to accomplish this month and this year that sometimes we lose track. So I first, started following you, I think about 7, 8 years ago, Gerd. And you caught my attention that I kind of was stumbling across a video that you created on YouTube, and it's around digital transformation. That was the title of the video. I'm sure you know exactly the one because I think it's one of your most well-known ones. And that led me to, I loved it. And the reason I was looking for that kind of content and why I love that video, in fact, I just played it yesterday, and I think it's as relevant today as it was 7 years ago, which is hard to imagine. But it brought me to this book that you wrote, Technology versus Humanity. And what I used the video for and the book, and by the way, I don't expect any commission, but I think I've sold a lot of your books. And that is when I'm in front of organizations, typically I'm trying to get across to them that the pace of change in the world is much greater than their pace of change and their sense of urgency inside their organization. And as we all know, long term, that doesn't end well. And so how do we get, sort of their heartbeat up? How do we get their attention in the future? How do we change to adapt faster? And I think the video does a wonderful job. And the book, I know you say you study or you put a lot of energy into the future to prepare us for the present. But I got to tell you, the book is wonderful at predicting where we are now. In fact, you almost wrote in the book about what could happen with social media companies. And then, we all know about the Facebook, Cambridge Analytics sort of fiasco and how technology and data can be used to really do things that we don't, and we didn't intend it for as users, or that maybe are not legal, or maybe are things that are quite dangerous. So I think that, I'd highly recommend, first of all, anyone to read this book. I think it's incredibly relevant. But tell us a little bit about the book. Like in a synopsis, what is the book Technology versus Humanity about? And then, 7, 8 years later, what did you think? Yeah, I kind of got this right. But anything surprised you now that you can kind of look back in time, or that you didn't see coming?
Yeah, I should probably write a new edition of the book. I mean, it's still very much like yesterday when I did write it, and it was quite painful because it was ongoing, constant changes. But basically, the book talks about how we can get to a future where we can take full advantage of technology without being squashed as humans. And that's kind of where we are right now, with social media, with fake news, with manipulation, with AI. And there are many, many good things about all of these things. For example, I use AI to translate my videos from English to Spanish and Portuguese, and sounds like I'm a pretty good Spanish speaker on my AI videos, and those things are very useful. But generally speaking, there is a trend towards looking at the entire world as a technology problem. And Mark Andreessen has pointed it out in his manifesto about the digital world, and it's completely like, technology will solve every problem, just get out of the way.
Right.
And my pitch in my book,
I think
was,
Elon Musk kind of is on that side of the argument as well.
Right. Yeah. And I would say, I started this 7 years ago when I said, look, technology will never solve cultural, political, policy, human problems, because they're not about efficiency. They're about beliefs, and they're about standards, and they're about ethics, and they're about all the soft stuff, right? So in the book, I talk about androrhythms, the human things, compassion, emotion, understanding, intuition, and algorithms, which is the logic of machines. And what we have now is a world that's increasingly run by algorithms that don't really comprehend, understand the complexity of real life. So, for example, I always say a good AI would understand about 5% of what I'm trying to say. For example, I use an AI runway called Runway, another one called Clip Drop, and of course ChatGPT and DALL-E.
Sure.
And I give an input and I say, okay, I want a bunch of philosophers sitting in a room writing with their left hand, right? And not a single time I get the prompt correct. They're all writing with their right hand, because people write with the right hand, and I can't get that fixed. And so there are so many things about artificial intelligence that is quite useful, but many things that are, like I always say, seldom doubtful but often wrong. So it's one of those things where you wonder about whether it's going to go. So basically, I think we need sort of a human protection mechanism. I call it the technocratic oath. After I wrote the book.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Companies essentially saying, look, we're going to do this for the common purpose of helping everyone excel, not just, the top 5%. So we have all these issues, and I think basically, I always say we should embrace technology because that's the key to solving problems, but we should not become technology.
Right.
Because, that's a key sentence from the book, because when you become technology, you are a commodity. Mm-hmm. And I don't want humans to become a commodity. I think that would be the wrong direction. And I'm a little bit afraid that OpenAI, with all of their initiatives of general intelligence, will turn people into commodities. Providing data is what we do first, and then later on we are replaced by the machine doing what we do, and then we lose authority and we lose participation. And of course, the worst part is, because of all the tech, we lose trust. So we stop trusting each other, we stop trusting media, and then the whole world is like a crime zone, So I think these things are kind of folding up on the horizon when we think about the possibilities of things going wrong, especially in geopolitics. And the top concern is, of course, fake news and manipulation. So all that stuff was kind of already touched upon in the book 7 years ago.
Yeah, like I said, it's incredible. And what I think the book does for me an amazing job of, and it's in the title, we often think, and I've spent my whole career in technology, and we often just go and prove, make it better, and leverage it and use it and try to improve our lives and businesses without really regard. In the past, we really haven't had a whole lot of regard to what the consequences, because the consequences weren't that broad or weren't that systemic. They were pretty isolated. Well, now in the world of AI, I think you've compared it to sort of nuclear technology, in that you have to kind of look ahead and say, well, what could happen? You could use it for good or evil. And it does a really nice job of sort of balancing both sides of the equation. Technology is certainly going to advance, and to some degree, it's part of sort of evolution, and we can't stop it. But at the other side, there is a convergence, and some people, call it a singularity. Some people might call it transhumanism. There's some, merging of humanity and technology. And that's really what I think you ask a lot of questions and a lot of challenges to is, wait a minute, we better think about this, because we don't want to lose what is human. We don't want to be less than human. We have certain attributes as humans that, frankly, technology will not and cannot replace. Some things that we are as humans that can replace wonderfully, like even our creativity and ideation and some things that you think is human, it does quite a nice job with, but it doesn't.
Well, I think of this more as augmentation.
Right.
For me, machines are about competence. So if I have a competent machine that can drive the car for me while I'm sleepy, in Los Angeles in my Tesla, fall asleep in the traffic jam, that's a good tool. It's competent. I wouldn't go on the German highway going 200 miles an hour, chasing each other with a self-driving car. That's not competent for that. But it is competent
Not
for the
today.
traffic jam. Yeah. Not today. But it's unlikely that it should or would, because it's very complex. Yeah. So what I don't want from a machine is consciousness or human agency, because that's really our job. And it's also a question of our responsibility and of our power. We don't want to give that up. And so we are now at the point where it's quite clear that in theory, it would be possible to build machines that can simulate all of these things, right? And so the question is not so much anymore, like 10 years ago, it was about whether it's possible. And today I would say pretty much anything is possible, right? It is about what we want. What exactly do we want from this technology? Do we want to get super rich and superhuman and live forever? Top 10%, that's basically us, right? Because we're in that bracket, basically. But, do we think of it like that? Or are we looking for a larger solution that goes beyond sort of monetary market issues or, world domination plans that companies like Google and Microsoft have?
I guess that's the question that I have for you is, how can we embrace technology without losing humanity? They do seem to be on a collision course. I mean, to some degree, you could argue we're already dependent on technology. Like no professional could really be effective without having a smartphone or having a connected laptop to the internet. And now we've got Neuralink, we've got technology, and it's lots of technology is coming where it's not even going to be a separate device. It's going to be part of us. And there's even biology, right?
The dependency question is a big one because it's not an absolute question. I depend on my coffee in the morning to feel good when I get up. Could I live without the coffee? Yes, it would be, I would say, okay, I want a coffee, but it's not there. So I could still do it, right? And dependency it's a gradual thing. And it's also something where we can say too much of a good thing can be a very bad thing.
Right.
So I drink 15 cups of coffee per day. I'm not going to be very healthy. The same goes for alcohol, smoking, whatever our habits are. And the same goes about technology. So using tools to do things is one thing, but then to kind of look at the tool as if this is the purpose of life, like I'm going to use virtuality or the Apple Pro Vision, to get the job done when I'm a doctor or something, that's one thing. But then it becomes something where I want to live inside of this thing because it's so great, right?
Yeah, like virtual reality, right? Where you can spend your whole life in there, right?
And that is not the same thing. That's not the same. And basically, the tool becomes a purpose. Marshall McLuhan said in the 70s, a famous philosopher, he said, first we create the tools, then the tools create us. And I think within reason, that happens all the time, like television, internet, or telephone. But when we get to the exponential scale, that would mean that we cease to be independent as an organic being. So that we are attached to the tethers of the neural lace, and without that we can't exist. And then we're in science fiction territory. But this is the proposal of companies, for example, like OpenAI, that say, okay, if we have an AGI, it will make much better politics. It will solve conflicts.
Right.
No, it will not. It will make it more efficient. Like every technology is about efficiency, right? So basically, if you have discrimination in everyday life, like women are being discriminated in Switzerland or many other places, they make less money than men. If you're going to use technology, for example, to look for jobs, technology will blow up that problem because it makes it more efficient, right? So if you're running an ad on LinkedIn, technology says, okay, 97% of data scientists are men, so we're not going to show this ad to women, right?
Right. Right.
Because women don't exist as data scientists.
There's lots of bias in how the algorithms are built, right? To make money largely.
not such a good thing. So basically, we have to not resort to a simple yes or no answer.
Right.
Like with AI, we have to say, okay, up to this level, it's useful and allowed and, possible. But for example, the idea of creating superhumans by merging them with AGI and merging their bodies physically in that as well, to me is an aberration. That doesn't mean it should be necessarily illegal, but it certainly should be the new normal. It's like saying, yeah, I can take a drug to, work faster and think quicker. I could do that. But should that be normal? Like, I'm going to compete with people who all take the drug, and if I don't take it, I can't compete. Those things are difficult topics that require societal conversation.
Is that what you're suggesting with something like the technocratic oath or some sort of agency, global agency, like we have the nuclear proliferation agency, that we have something that thinks about these things? I mean, we have agreements now, I think, around cloning people. I mean, that's illegal. Is something that governs those kinds of things?
We need to govern on the existential level, not on the micro level.
Right.
No government wants to govern the use of a hammer.
Right.
The hammer. Okay, I can kill somebody with a hammer, but there's no law about not killing with a hammer. So with AI, is different. If I'm going to build a super intelligence, then I'm essentially building the most powerful thing ever created, even more than nuclear, even more than gas and oil and the industrial society. And we can't afford to make the same mistakes again, because when we rolled out the industrial economy, we said, okay, we want progress. Who cares about the environment? Now we are here today, environment is dying. We have to, big issue. If we're going to do the same with AI, we would say we're going to build superhuman entities, digital entities, and that would probably not be controllable anymore. And so we need to not micro-regulate by saying your chatbot can't do X, Y, Z, or
right.
But there are privacy rules about that, of course. But we do need to think about creating an AGI, which is the official strategy of OpenAI, and to some degree of Microsoft. That to me is a governmental issue. It's an existential issue. It's not a business issue, because of course it's going to make a lot of money. But what kind of world do we want where we make a lot of money, but we are completely cut off free will or any humanness because the machine already anticipates everything? That would be truly like
it's a tough thing though, because it does. There is some correlations to sort of nuclear technology, and I just watched the film Oppenheimer, and that was really an interesting film for me to learn kind of the history of how that built up in the United States. And to some degrees, there's an arms race going on right now with AI. So if, Russia or China or whoever it is has AGI before, we do. Now, I know this isn't officially a government program, but, there's great power in that, and there's sophistication and control of certain things, world economies and things. So to some degree, there's an arms race, but then, like, to your point, you don't want it to like change humanity or do things that could cause harm, right?
Well, but of course, this issue is not the only issue, because we have now quantum leaps in technology. I call this the game changers, not just AI. So AI is the first. Then there's quantum computing, supercomputing. There's nuclear fusion, right? There's synthetic biology, building new materials from biology background in engineering, essentially. And then there's geoengineering and many others. And with all of those really large things, we need global consensus as to, who's in charge, who's mission control, what are the ground rules. And, if you're going to regulate that it's going to snow on Wednesday in Germany, that's not just an issue for Germany.
Yeah, for sure.
So, right. And the same goes for AI. So we're going to need to work together, because if we don't do that, then we do get an arms race. And of course, the argument that China is doing all that stuff unencumbered, yada, 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 I understand it's an argument of fear. But in the end, we're living in one globe, and there's not going to be a single country that can just go ahead and do as they please, because now we're already mingling with the policy of Brazil to see what they do about the Amazon. It's not like we're just going to, stand back and say, let's wait for better times.
Do you see, I mean, from your perspective, do we have a shot at, is there any momentum, any sort of global political momentum headed that way? And do we have a shot at any sort of body like we built with the nuclear, back in the day, after World War II? There was a lot of global momentum say, hey, we don't want this ever to happen again. And the world sort of came together. Do you see anything like that now? Or what would it take?
I think the UN has proposed a similar scenario. I call it the International Artificial Intelligence Agency, the IAIA.
Yep.
For that to be created. And of course, the UN is now painfully understaffed, unresolved, unpaid, and unauthorized to do much of anything. Unfortunately, because they're on the right path with this, but we have a big issue here, and this is not a new issue. It's just been, as you can see, with Israel, Hamas, and all these discussions. What exactly do we empower the UN to do?
Right.
And will they be able to do the job? Will we give them enough money? Will we let Antonio go out and do it? Rather than constantly shooting for his head. So he is a great guy that points in the right direction, but this is a very big question. So the answer is, I think, unfortunately, I think it's quite likely we're going to see a major incident first.
Right.
That triggers our response to say, holy shit, now, we got to do something. We had 2 bombs first, and this is precisely what Oppenheimer said. He doesn't want that bomb to be used.
Right.
And they could have used it out in the ocean, but they didn't. And, and now we had this precedent. And now I think it's this painful moment where we see, for example, the most likely scenario there would be artificial intelligence essentially destroying the stock market in a global financial crisis, not by design,
right,
but just by complete misinformation.
Well, you could argue World War II, like you said, there was other ways to show that this technology was available without killing millions of people, and that was a political decision as much as anything, and probably not the best decision. So there may have to be some sort of large mistake with this technology for the world to go, wow, that we don't want to go there, we don't want this to proliferate. So that seems like how change happens sometimes, right?
Yeah, look what happened with Facebook, and when Snowden reported what Facebook is doing with the NSA and Google and everybody else, that made a big dent in people's thinking about the internet. It didn't, unfortunately, stop everything. But I think if we're going to see it, one can only hope that we're going to see a scenario where the damage is only money, not like air traffic control, collapse of 100,000 airplanes crashing, And these things are they're unfortunately not out of the stretch, They are entirely feasible.
Absolutely.
If we empower machines to make decisions that they're not equipped for.
Well, let's talk about things maybe on the brighter side of the scale. There's a lot of promise to leveraging some of this technology, healthcare, longevity. You've talked about sort of global, environmental challenges that we have. What are you most excited about that, there's the AI technology can really have major breakthroughs that benefit, society?
Well, I see the first benefit in essentially saying that if we turn the word around, I like intelligent assistance, IA rather than AI. I think that's 95% of the good that it can do, because let's remember there are so many stupid systems, computer systems in the world everywhere, whether it's the smart city controls, the environmental control leaks, the pollution controls, all of that stuff that was never made smart. And smart government, right? Being able to use digital government and, all sort of helping things, like translation, like, filing things, like monkey work, basically, right? Commodity work. Think about this is like a huge list of commodity work that we all have to do because machines are stupid. If machines could no longer be stupid, which is what everybody's working on, then the machine could say, oh, Gerd is spelled Gerd. It's not an English name, it's a German name. Therefore, I'm not going to say nerd or turd, or I'm going to say Gerd, because I learn, my computer still hasn't learned my name. So when you think about all those things, that would be very useful because, it would basically reduce pollution, it would increase efficiency. There are charts showing that, knowledge workers can be 50 to 100x as efficient using AI, which increases GDP, which hopefully rising tide floats all boats, right? That's the concept there. That could be good or bad depending on the company that you work for. But we could do so many things with this. I'm really excited about translation. I'm excited about robotic process automation, about all the things that make our lives better without removing us. So that's where the focus has to be, in my view. Like environmental control, the green economy, green technology. Right. I mean, if we use AI to help with green technology, we can solve the climate problem. And then if we switch to renewable energy, not fossil fuels anymore, then problem solved. And genetic engineering, supervising, analyzing the human body, coming up with new medication, which is now done with AI. Right? I mean, think about all of those things that are not like, they're not about transhumanism. They're not about the singularity. They're not about miracle machines. They're just better machines.
Yeah, I love the idea of intelligent augmentation, and centered around humanity, not replacing humanity. So I think that's a great concept. So I recently saw you at a TED Talk, and you talked about the good future. So talk a little bit about what that is to you.
Yeah, I started working on that a few years ago, basically as a follow-up to technology versus humanity, because so many people say, when I talk about the future, saying, oh, that's all nice and fine, but the future sucks. The future is terrible. And, in America, for example, 70% of younger people between 25 and 40 say that their future would be worse than their parents today, presidents, right? And they won't have kids because of the future. I mean, it's just out there, right? It's like...
It is. It certainly is.
So the future has a bad reputation right now. And this is partly because of geopolitics and things like Putin and the war and all that kind of stuff, but also because social media, 50% of all news is now social media, basically emphasizes all bad things. It divides us, right? So basically a lot of people are moving towards a hopeless, despondent, dystopian, dark scenario of what the future holds. And my mission is to say, you know what? We are doing so many amazing things that will allow us to create the good future, good being, for example, not dying, not having diseases, no poverty, no childbirth, death, simple stuff like that, right? Not talking about 3 cars or a house or so, right? So just simple stuff, right? So I started this campaign for the good future, and I want to start a global campaign like New York did in the 70s or 80s, where New York had a branding agency that came in and said, let's call it I Love New York. And so I want to start a campaign that says, I love the future. Because, it's the future. We need to be more hopeful, because the problem is then when people are not hopeful about the future, they become despondent. They don't become open towards change. They lock down and they vote for idiots.
Well, not to mention suicide rates are skyrocketing and all sorts of other things, violence, different, mass murders. Like there's a lot of things that are on the rise, and it kind of is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what I'm taking from you is it's really like, let's focus on what can be, and we can manifest the future. Like we can make the future be what we want the future to be if we focus on it. Is that...
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Kelly, the famous futurist who I admire, who is now is a senior maverick at Wired magazine, but he's out in San Francisco. And he said the other day, we should be optimistic about the future, not because we have less problems, but because we have the capacity to solve a lot more than before. And that's just so true. But the problem is that technological and scientific capacity does not translate into solutions without policy and collaboration.
Right.
So we can say, yeah, we can save the world, parenthesis, with AI. And yeah, we can also destroy it with AI. So in order for that to happen, we need to collaborate. We need to come to the same conclusion. And we need to say, you know what? The future is better than we think. There's just a few things that we need to do. We need to clean up our collaboration and our purpose, not just have more scientists. Yeah. So this is something that becomes crucial as we go on, because now we're moving into this kind of, I wouldn't say post-capitalism, but a new economic logic, because the old economic logic is destroying us. It's basically grow at
It's
whatever
the
terms you
carbon.
have.
Yeah,
Right?
it's we're doing damage to make profits in the short term, but we're eliminating rainforests and we're overrunning, nature and different things. So it's more of a mindset.
Not just that, but we also have carbon companies like in the sense of digital carbon, digital pollution like Meta and Facebook, where essentially we are harvesting information and we're extracting things and then we're extorting people with that information. So basically it's the same thing, and we need to think about this and say, well, we need to change that business model. Basically, they used to say in the Valley, moving fast and break things, right? Now we need to move fast and fix things.
Yeah, good point.
Right? This is really what we need to do. And we have all the means. We just got to get on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a mindset. It's a very positive mindset. And again, think ahead and what can we do now to build for a brighter day? And we have so many tools now to do that that we've never had before. So one question I ask a lot of guests, and it's a challenge that a lot of people have, and you as a futurist is even more critical. And the question is, how do you keep up with or stay ahead of the curve of change and technology? And how does one do that? Because everything's moving so fast and everyone's got a day job and kids and life pressure. So how do you do that? And how could people sort of take away some practical things to keep up with all this change?
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, of course, the knowledge pressure, as I call the knowledge pressure, to know things, it's becoming huge. Mm-hmm. But since the rise of AI, I have resorted to a different thinking there, and that knowledge and data and information is really kind of a collecting job for a machine. So I use a lot of tools that collect for me. And what I need to do is to focus on the important job, which is understanding, intuition, and wisdom, parentheses, to get to the point to where you can basically have tacit knowledge, right? And there's a saying from Malawi, it says, knowledge without wisdom is like water in the sand. And machines have knowledge without wisdom. So it's very useful, but what does it amount to? Right? Because do you draw the right conclusions? And so with my work, it's really about drawing conclusions, to contemplate and to chew on it. And so I read 4 or 5 books a month. I read lots of things online. Of course, I watch lots of YouTube stuff from my colleagues, and I collect, right? And then I sit down and I digest, and I write bullets down. So I say, okay, it's like this, or it's like that. And then I come up with memes and bottom lines. For example, I'm giving a talk for a big tech company in 2 weeks in Dubai. And one of the memes says that technology alone is not going to save us. That's my conclusion. Mm-hmm. You may not appreciate that being a tech company, but technology alone is not the solution to our problems. It's just a tool that we use, right? So basically it's complex, but, I spend about, 3/4 of my time collecting, analyzing, talking to others. And then eventually you arrive at this kind of bottom lines,
Well, I think it's good advice. I mean, in fact, a lot of people may not know this, but like Warren Buffett, who's one of the best, richest people on the planet and best investors, he spends an inordinate amount of time reading. Like I think he reads something like 4 or 5 hours a day. Of course, he's reading 10Ks and annual reports and different things, but he does an incredible amount of reading. And I think one thing that the arts get right or do better than the business world is in sports or in arts, you do most of your time is practice and very little of your time is performance. And in the business world, it seems like it's 99.9% perform. And it's very little, thinking, researching, reflecting, training. And so I think, what I'm hearing from you is, hey, let's invest more in ourselves so that we can reflect and think forward and plan and strategize and collect our own thoughts as humans, because that's what humans do rather than let some machine do it for us, right?
Well, I always say, understanding the future is probably more of an art than a science. If you're a scientist, you would disagree, but then, of course, you have more science in your life. And if you're a technologist, you would disagree because you have tech in your life. But I think in the end, Steve Jobs said it perfectly, rest in peace. it's a combination of art and technology.
For sure.
Art and science. And he was brilliant at that. And I think this is a kind of, you have to, when you're sorting through a lot of information, eventually you have to come to a point to where you're creating a final thing from it. That's what artists do. So, and that is basically, it goes out there and it's done, and you're not going to understand the future based on facts. There's no such thing. If that was true, I would be serious. I would be the richest guy in the world, not Elon. Because, you can't think of it that way. In the end, you come to conclusions. And then if you're lucky, then 9 out of 10 turn out to be true.
Or in some cases, you may want to prevent a bad future. You may want to take action now to say, let's prevent something worse from happening. So, the future hasn't happened yet, so we all get some sort of role in it, right?
The future fit, this is the idea of being fit for the future. I think it's really important to say that you're never going to know an answer for everything.
Right.
But if you are prepared and you've read a lot and you're informed, then you make a decision that says, you know what, I think this is not true, and therefore my decision is going to be like this. And you can instantly do so. This is like when you drive a car on the German highway, again, going 200 miles an hour. You don't have time to ponder, whether this, what happens here. You make an instant decision, And we're going into the future now at 2,000 miles an hour. So, we have to get better with our intuition, our imagination, and our preparedness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good analogy. I drove the Autobahn once and was going about 170 miles an hour, and then I slowed down a bit because there was some car, and so I might have been going 140, and all of a sudden, before I knew it, I saw the lights flash in my rearview mirror, and someone was coming up on me, probably going 180 or more, and I was the slow person. I was going 140 miles an hour. I've never gone that fast in my life. In the US, that'd be unheard of. And yet I was in the wrong lane, the slow person. That kind of feels like the technology world. Like, you think you're going fast, but guess what? Somebody is ready to pass you going very much faster.
I think this is is what I call the future mindset. Bill Gates says we have to spend 1 hour per day in the future. And I totally agree. If we do that, then we can increase our readiness. And we can also reduce our fear. For example, somebody comes up to us and says, this AI will now do the following, and your job will change as follows. If we understand this, we can put it in the right perspective, and we can be prepared. But if we're not paying attention, and this is the biggest problem that most of us have, especially business leaders, we're just not paying attention.
Yeah.
And we only pay attention if it hits us. So we have to pay more attention to the future. And then when we get there, we can say, yes, I think I know what to say.
There's a lot of things that Bill Gates has said or done that I don't agree with, but that is one that I do agree with, that we do need to spend time thinking about the future a lot more than most people do. So tell us what's next, Gerd. I'm curious what you're always working on, something, thinking about the future. What's next and what are you working on?
Yeah, so the Good Future project, which essentially is the idea of rebranding the future. So I'm looking for partners for that to start a global branding campaign about why the future is good and how do we make it good. Sort of to give rise to the feeling that people are excited about the future. So that's a big project where I'm looking for partners and so on. And I'm making a new film. Can't tell you what's it all about, but my last one was called Look Up Now, was about AI. So artificial intelligence is a big topic for me. I'm working on some really great new speaking topics. One of them is about the 10 facts about the future that are going to be sort of ruthlessly pointing out what is actually happening. And that's already quite a popular request. I continue to work on new things, new ideas, and, to make more films and to think about how it can have more impact.
Yeah, excellent. Well, highly recommend for those listening to follow Gerd. He's very active on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the content you put out is always great and inspiring. So, last question on the podcast for all the guests is kind of setting aside sort of all the things that we talked about with AI in the future, but just looking back at your career, and you've had a varied career going back to Silicon Valley and the tech business and lots of different business ventures. But you're talking to your grandkids or you're talking to yourself maybe when you're 18. What are just life lessons, like put all this aside, that you'd want to share and pass on some advice to the next generation just about living life and the life experience, what would you say?
I think the most important thing that I've learned is that it's much more important to trust your humanity and your intuition and your human things than to look for too much arguments and logic to prove things that can't be proven. So to follow what you think, what you have discovered, to follow your intuition. And for education, that, for example, means we need to further our human education rather than just technology education. So to spend more time on that, because that is ultimately what machines can never, hopefully, do or shouldn't be doing, is the human-only skills, which are emotions, compassion, and so on. And also, I think the other thing I've learned over time is that it's very important to be smart and to be informed. But when you talk to other people and you meet other people, then it's people to people. It's a person to a person. It's not a fact sheet against a fact sheet. And everybody is a person, right? And it's so important also to maintain this positive outlook that good things are possible. I've learned over time because I travel, a lot, that if I start with a negative anticipation, then I get negative things.
Yeah.
So true. So sometimes you have to be careful, of course, not to be too naive about positive things, but to find a good mix there is really important. And the other thing, lastly, is I think the offline luxury, which I talk about a lot. Very important to not just think of this place where you can connect and get more things as reality, but I always say offline is the new luxury, because when you go there, then you can decompress, you can regurgitate things, and you can find things. And it's very important to pull back and do the human things, which are usually not about data.
It's interesting.
So nature, basically. Nature.
Do the things that are human. So focus on the things that are human. So great stuff. I have to say, Gerd, using your own words, it's been a mind-boggling conversation.
Yes.
And so
thank you.
I enjoyed it. I could talk to you for hours, and I will continue to follow you. And I will leave the audience here with a quote that you recently used, which is from Kevin Kelly, which said, "We should be optimistic not because our problems are smaller than we thought, but because our capacity to solve them is larger than we thought." And I thank you for sharing that and everything you shared with the audience today.
You're welcome. So embrace technology, but don't become it, right? That's the bottom line.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gerd.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the 1% Better podcast. We hope you found it insightful and useful for your improvement journey. As always, you can access podcast transcripts and links to reference material at Trissential.com/podcast. If you would like to be a guest on 1% Better, you can do it on the same site. And if you enjoyed today's podcast, please like, share, or rate our podcast. Until the next episode, here's to getting 1% better every day.